Furiosa's like Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. They both have ingredients for a great movie, but they settle on just being a good one. And much like Kingdom, if you go into this expecting a non-stop action movie like Fury Road, you're going to be let down. At its core, Furiosa is a survival thriller with bursts of wild, crazy action sequences that are worth the ticket price alone. George Miller still gives you most of the bare basics you expect from a Mad Max movie. The visuals are massive in scope, filled with bright, saturated yellow, orange, and gray images that make the tiniest ounce of green stand out and have emotional weight to it. Lots of quick-cut hyper-editing, frantic zoom-ins, and certain footage sped up that actually adds to the intensity as opposed to feeling chopped up and leaving audience members wondering, what the fuck am I even looking at right now? Like I said, there aren't a ton of action sequences, but from a thriller standpoint, whenever someone is shot, a car explodes, or somebody's run over, your jaw's on the floor the entire time. There are two 15-minute chases in the middle portion of the movie that were easily the major highlights. They feature gadgets, weaponry, choreography that I had never seen Mad Max do before. The stunt work is still mostly practical with longer takes to really show off the acrobatics and the carnage, and that's always a sight to see, but you can definitely feel the PG-13 weighing down the violence on this one. It's not Dune Part 2 PG-13, but it does still feel pretty tame, and the visual effects in this one, I didn't want to admit, but are really hit and miss. I'll say this, whenever it's a CGI background or one car being chased by an entire gang, it looks realistic, but whenever they have to green screen an actor, it looks Robert Rodriguez fake. Most of it's in the first half of the movie, and it does get better over time, but it's still really distracting, and even the music in this one is hit and miss. Junkie XL came back to do the score, and he still does a good job, but the music's placed in weird moments where you don't really feel the emotional impact you're supposed to. Anya-Taylor and Alyla Browne had a really tough job going in, even without having to fill in for Charlize Theron, because not every actor can visually communicate a character's inner thoughts through facial expressions and body language, as opposed to dialogue. And in Taylor-Joy's case, it's very clear that she had even less dialogue in the script because there are weird lines that are obviously dubbed when the camera's not on her. I genuinely don't understand it. There was no reason for those lines to exist in the first place, but at the same time, I wasn't expecting anybody to outshine Charlize in this one. And just on their own, both of them gave good performances. Browne especially makes a huge impact on this movie because the first half of it is entirely her as Furiosa. And for any of my friends and collaborators who are wondering, no, she's not an invincible girl boss who can do just about everything on her own. Furiosa is shown from the very beginning that she was always a survivalist, but there was still a lot that she had to learn on her own. And because of the apocalyptic nature of being thrown into this wasteland for the very first time, she has absolutely no idea who to trust. So seeing Taylor-Joy and Browne visually stare down just about everyone and everything, looking for an opportunity to escape and wondering who is either a friend or a foe in this case, was actually pretty suspenseful. And even though a lot of Furiosa's backstory is pretty cliched, there are still certain aspects to it, like how she lost her arm, how she ended up in the Citadel, why she would trust Max later on, or what drove her to rescue the sisters, were all things that I legitimately didn't see coming, and it actually added some context to Fury Road that made it an ounce better. It wasn't necessary, and like many people, you can argue that this movie is unnecessary because Furiosa was an interesting character based on what you didn't know about her. But at the same time, enough of this was entertaining and tense that I honestly didn't mind. Chris Hemsworth, on the other hand, is clearly having the time of his life just yucking it up, and it's clear that he would love to play villains as much as heroes. If you've ever seen Bad Times at the El Royale, you know that he can do it. And I will say, the first half of the movie is where Hemsworth really shines because he's much more calm and charismatic compared to most Mad Max villains, where he's trying to win people over and then strike fear in their hearts as opposed to doing it the other way around like we're used to. In the second half of the movie, he's fine, but he's more like Scar from Lion King in the second half. He's losing power, people are turning on him, and he's going mad and pathetic, and it's just not interesting to see a villain do that. He does have one speech towards the end that elevated a given scene, but I'll get more into why that scene itself just wasn't enough for me. I almost forgot to mention that one line in the trailer where he takes the mic and goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines." That had a much more fucked up payoff than I was expecting. That was... wow. Now, there's one thing about George Miller movies that I think a lot of people overlook and kind of delves into what I didn't like about the movie. In almost all of his films, the main hero and their journey is kind of the side plot, whereas the world building is the main focus of the film. I mean, look at Happy Feet. Is it really about Mumble gaining acceptance, or is it really more about all the penguins trying to find out where all their food is going and how to stop the fishermen? Or Babe Pig in the City. Do you really remember the pig being the standout or the city? And hell, even with George Miller's last movie, 3,000 Years of Longing, which is a super underrated film that not enough people went to see, it's not really about Idris Elba as the Jinn. It's more the stories he's telling and the characters who he served in those different timelines. And that really threw off a lot of people in Fury Road, where Furiosa was really the main star of the show and Max being second fiddle, even though last I checked from watching Road Warrior and bits of Thunderdome, he already kind of was second fiddle. And honestly, if Doug Walker hadn't mentioned it in all of his Mad Max reviews, I wouldn't have caught on to it either. And I bring it up because even by George Miller's standards, all of those films, the main characters still had enough focus that you remember the arc. I didn't get that with this. It really felt like Furiosa, and a lot of characters in this movie, honestly, felt overshadowed. Not because of the script, but because the pacing in this is more math than the characters, ironically. In the second half especially, there are so many times where the editors have no idea how much or little screen time to give to each plot thread or character arc that it simultaneously goes back and forth from being too rushed or drawn out and explaining shit that did not need to be explained, which is weird because like any Mad Max movie, there's a lot of subtle world building where just looking at the characters, their designs, and the minor tidbits of dialogue that we don't understand, we can still pick up on. We can still piece together the puzzle. And in the first half, it's a lot more consistent because while we do see the Green Place, we do see Furiosa and her family, we're only given tiny tidbits that give you a glimpse as to what her relationships were, what this world was like, without giving away too much. There's ironically still an element of mystery to Furiosa in the very end, but at the same time, everything from her life in the Citadel, the people she bonded with, and adjusting to her own arm were completely brushed over. Meanwhile, the climax goes on for fucking ever. And why is that a problem in a Mad Max movie? Well, because it's more of an emotional climax as opposed to an actual fight scene, which that alone was disappointing because even though, yeah, Chris Hemsworth can knock Anya-Taylor Joy on her ass over and over again, you can suspend a little bit of disbelief and you still want to see them like unleashed with their cars and their weapons and shit like that. But no, it's more of a mind game of cat and mouse between the two, which could actually be a lot of fun, but it is just drawn out to death. It is anticlimactic. There is way more talking than there needs to be, and there were just so many opportunities that you could have taken, but they just completely glance over them. Because George Miller and most of his crew came back, I kind of felt like I should have gotten more, but at the same time, I was expecting a lot less because I knew it wasn't going to be as good as Fury Road. But, you know, judging it on its own, I still had a good time. I was still smiling, my heart was still racing, gripping my fists at the action scenes that we did get. Even though Anya-Taylor Joy doesn't come close to Charlize Theron, she still does a good job, and Alyla Browne makes a huge impression. George Miller has still got it as a director, but dude should really start working on more projects like 3,000 Years of Longing, something we haven't seen before, something that feels fresh and original, but still has that batshit insane spectacle that we're used to with him. So, honestly, I highly recommend checking out this movie, but if you get the sense that you're not going to enjoy it as much as Fury Road, or you didn't like Fury Road to begin with, I'd say wait till it goes up on streaming. And with that, guys, thanks as always for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of Furiosa. Be sure to stay tuned for more reviews. Be sure to like and subscribe. And check me out on Patreon and buy me a coffee. Take care.